I'm gonna move right over here. So thank you everybody for spending time with us this morning. For our last presentation, we are going to learn from Josh Atwood. And this will be a great presentation because a lot of the things that we've been using today has to do with what he's going to share with us to make for more meaningful and engaging educational experiences. So to begin with, Josh is the Information Education Coordinator at the Statewide Administration Office for DLNR, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. Prior to moving into this role in 2020, he coordinated various invasive species efforts for the division, including the support program of the Interagency Hawaii Invasive Species Council. His new role allows him to work on environmental education and communication projects across DOFA's various programs. Having moved into the new position on the first day of the COVID teleworking, Josh has worked with the DOFA outreach specialists and other partners in exploring new methods to engage stakeholders virtually and for pivoting education efforts online. So this will be a great way to close our first workshop of our sessions here, of our series, with learning how we can use these various tools in outreach education given in a virtual realm. So mahalo, Josh, for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to learning more from you. Whenever you're
Mahalo
ready,
to
you
you,
can
Hoku.
jump
All right.
in.
Aloha and good morning, everybody. As Hoku said, I'm Josh Atwood. This presentation, it'll be a little bit of a shift. It doesn't have anything to do with ROD, really. And this came out of a discussion I had with Hoku and Amber and JB a few months back about different tools that we had been using in DOFA, one of which was Mentimeter. So I'm glad to see it's already integrated into this workshop. And so everybody here's got some experience with that. But we'll talk about a few more tools as well, and also some process suggestions from a few of the communications workshops we've done over the past year. So I just wanted to first start with a clarification, the essential work that we've all been tasked with since COVID started has required pivots in multiple parts of our work. And so a lot of what we're pivoting in right now is online outreach and education. So the way we're doing virtual teaching workshops through our project learning tree, or updating the content on our website with some cool new tools like story maps and virtual tours, and a bigger focus on video production. That's going to be talked about more by Pua Hemuli next week, I believe, in a different workshop. And so the other pivot sector that I wanted to talk about today is online engagement. And so this is more about both internal meeting amongst partners or coworkers, and then external stakeholder engagement, and trying to find ways to get them or keep them engaged and get their input during a time when we can't actually get together with our stakeholders. So before we talk about the challenges, because I know everybody, it's been a rough year, and there's a lot of things that are not great about our new situation, but it's not all bad, especially when it comes to online engagement. So I just want to briefly recognize that there's been some really good things that came out of this. I think we have better geographic equity, especially in Hawaii, where that advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, of being on Oahu has kind of been erased. And so now everybody's on the same platform when it comes to engagement. And along with that comes the physical convenience, even for folks on Oahu. I don't think any of us miss driving downtown, looking for parking, sitting in the windowless conference room at DOFA if you're in the admin office. And so I know I'm more likely to jump into meetings if I can just do it virtually. The other real benefit here that I've found is instant documentation. We don't have those giant post-it notes sitting on easels. There's no, breakdown afterwards. If you're using some of these digital input tools, you instantly have your input. And for some of the tools, it's also instant analysis and summary. So that's a real benefit. And then I think you're also more likely to hear from the introverts. We all go to meetings in person, where the discussion time is dominated by a few individuals, and you might not get any input from people who are less likely to speak up. But if you're using these behind the scenes tools that people can, enter their input in, even the most introverted folks, I think you're more likely to get their input captured this way. But yes, so there is some of it that's not great. And so I'm sure we've all run into some technical issues and potential for chaos with virtual meetings and engagement. It's really hard to keep people focused. I know I'm guilty of always multitasking in meetings, and it's really easy when your computer's right there and you can have multiple windows open. And then I think the real downside is just the dehumanizing aspect of not being with people. You don't have little side conversations. It's no break time where you ask people about their lives, things like that. But we can address these three areas of challenges with tools, which is what I'm mostly going to talk about today, but also a little bit of process. And so I have just a couple of slides before we get into the tool examples, talking about some of the methods we've used that have worked well. So in terms of using new technologies in your workshops and meetings, I think it's good to let people know ahead of time what you'll be using in case they have some technical limitations or they need to, set up an account with something, which hopefully they don't. One of the other things I've really appreciated is being in meetings where the meeting doesn't stop for people who have bad connections. This is always going to happen, especially with people working from home. They don't have great internet connections. The meeting's got to move on. And so one thing that we've done is if people can't access one of the tools or, we can't hear their audio, just give them an option to either enter their input into the tools you're using later or follow up with them one-on-one afterwards, but keep your meeting going so the rest of the people stay engaged. Obviously, make sure you can mute and kick people out if you get Zoom bombed. I've heard that's happened to a few folks. And then at DOFA, we're having to do both more engagement meetings, but also our regular, more formal public meetings. And so one thing we are doing for those more formal meetings is pairing Zoom meetings with a live stream where anyone can watch, but you don't run the risk of having, hundreds of people in a Zoom meeting, trying to talk over the proceedings of a board, something like that. And so we've found good success in doing live streams. I think more importantly than the technical stuff is the humanizing side of things. The workshops that I've really appreciated in the last year start with everybody saying something. I find this in person and for virtual meetings that there's like a little seal there that if people don't speak at the start, they're less likely to speak at any point. And so breaking that seal, even if it's just through the introductions or an icebreaker, is really important. I've been really surprised because I tend to be a more, I don't want to take up people's time. So let's, dive into the agenda, get through things as fast as possible. I've been to a few communication workshops now where we really took time. I'm talking like half an hour to 40 minutes of the workshop to let everyone go around and do kind of a deeper humanizing icebreaker. And no one's complained about taking that time out of their day. And to the contrary, we've gotten really good feedback that it's been a good way to start the meeting and just kind of hold some space in a time where everybody's kind of rushing between things. And so there's just some examples up here of different icebreakers. Flower, thorn, bud is, talk about something that's great, something that's challenging, and something that you're looking forward to. The meaning of your name, I think, has been a really interesting one that kind of gets people to open up about who they are and why they're there. And then similarly, but on a more kind of professional note, this last one here, what's your reason for being there today? Or what's your calling for being part of that discussion? Encourage cameras on so people are actually focused, and then just call on people if they're not contributing, just like school. I think it's a way to make people kind of stay on their toes and realize that they don't want to drift off and look at their email. And then the last note here, I can't actually see it because my Zoom controls are blocking it. I think it says encourage use of the chat. You know, I used to go to meetings in person a lot and have little side conversations or sit next to work friends and we'd, you know, elbow each other and have a little chit chat. I'm still doing that sometimes in like direct messaging functions of Zoom chats or whatever. And it helps kind of emulate that real world feel in a virtual meeting. So switching over to tools, just a couple of technical notes here. I won't stay on this slide long, but try to choose tools that don't require a login. So like Mentimeter, no one here today had to sign up for a Mentimeter account beforehand, nor were they asked to, you know, enter in their email in order to participate. So try to stick to those. And then test everything in multiple browsers. We've found even with, you know, common stuff like Google Docs, people won't have it work if they're using, you know, Microsoft Edge versus Safari versus Chrome. And so it's just good to know what your limitations are. And then as far as humanizing your virtual meetings and keeping people focused, I think that's really where the interactive tools come in. So I'm gonna go fairly quickly through some examples of a few types of these. So polls, word clouds, virtual sticky notes, and whiteboards. And these are all ones that I've personally used in the last year and we've gotten good feedback on. So the first one here is polls. And so I'm sure everybody has done this. You're doing it in this session through Mentimeter. And, you know, Amber and folks had asked me to just kind of walk through what are the differences of some of the different platforms that people might be interested in. So the first one I have up here is Zoom Pro. For those of us who work for the state, I don't believe Teams does polls right now. And I think you need a Zoom Pro account in order to activate the polling feature. For Zoom, you have to set up your questions ahead of time. This is the only option I saw where you can give feedback that is not anonymous. So if that matters, that's a good platform to focus on. But it just does these kind of single multiple choice questions. And it's really pretty basic, which is fine if that's all you're looking for. In contrast, there's Mentimeter, which everybody's getting familiar with today. And so you as a meeting host would make your poll questions at mentimeter.com. You can actually make entire slideshows there that just incorporate some of the polling or question features of Mentimeter. But they also have templates that it's basically, it could be, you know, an alternative to PowerPoint or Google Slides if you want it to be. And your users will not go to mentimeter.com. That's the back end. They'll go to Menti or use some other link or code you provide them. It does a lot of different options. So there's the single multiple choice voting, but there's also ranking. There's scales. You know, how do you feel about this on a scale of 1 to 5? Or more open-ended questions that people can provide text input and then it scrolls up the screen as more and more thoughts come in. And you can do fun things like quiz competitions, but there all the input is anonymous and your results display live. So those are two things to keep aware of. So you're already seeing today the top example here, which is just a simple polling feature. So you enter in your answer at menti.com, and then you see a bar graph where you can do a pie chart or a donut. I don't know if the group has done this already, so let's try this together. We're gonna do a rank poll where you get to rank different options and we'll see how the group feels about things. So we're going to try to do this live. If you folks, and we're going to do it a different way. I know the team's been providing Menti links in the chat. So instead, I want you to, on your computer or on your smartphone, if you have it next to you, you can either go to menti.com and enter this number code that you see on the screen, or you can scan this QR code. that you're seeing on the screen. And then as the meeting host, what I'm going to do is change the screen that I'm sharing so that you can see the results. Okay. So we'll see if anybody is able to log into this. And I'm going to give you just a few minutes here. Check it out. Oh yeah, we've got a few people now. So you can see it's a live ranking system. So people are putting in their ranks. The back end kind of compiles it together. No love for white pine. I'm from Maine, and that's our, I think that's our state tree and our state flower. So I'm gonna put in that I really like white pine. And we don't need to stay here, but you can see how this works. It's kind of a fun live input system. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the presentation now. So that's rank polls. The other option that I've seen people use before for a similar model is meeting sift. So this is a very similar model, except that I believe for this one you have to present from meeting sift, whereas Mentimeter you can kind of use as a side presentation. I suppose you could either way. It just requires, like what I just did, switching between presentations or browser windows on the fly. This one has, I think, a bit more technical options in terms of the types of questions you can ask. So in addition to polls, you can also do calculate. So you can poll the audience for, how many volunteers did you have, or how many people came to your event. And as people provide answers, it's calculating an output, a sum, or, whatever your question is. It also does ranking, and then it does a quadrant tool as well, which you can see in one of the screenshots. So if you're doing a SWOT, that can be a way to do that online really easily. And then it also does the open-ended Q&As. And similar to Mentimeter, you control it from meetingsift.com for the backend, but then your participants go to a different, easier URL. The other tool I wanted to talk about for really simple input is word clouds. And you can do this through Mentimeter, MeetingSift. There's a bunch of different options out there. This is another one that I'm going to try to have us do together. We might go a little bit over on time here, but again, go to menti.com and enter that code, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And I'm going to switch to Menti. Okay, so our word cloud here, which I'm not sure if I'm sharing or not. I think I am, yeah. Our word cloud is, what words would you use to describe 2020, everybody's favorite year? And so you can see that people can each enter in 4 words, and the ones that are in common become largest. And so as more and more people enter in their words, you get this really nice snapshot of sentiments about something. So if you're looking for group input on, we used this in a meeting to talk about what values do people have when they think about hunting in Hawaii. And a lot of just great common words popped up for people, or, how do people feel about our organization? It's a great way to get that snapshot without having people, respond to a really in-depth text survey. And it doesn't come out with statistics, but it comes out with this really great visual. And so it looks like here, some people had some positive things to say, but if we were to describe kind of the takeaway for 2020, we can say that this group felt that it was a stressful, challenging time, which seems pretty accurate. So thank you everybody for contributing to our word cloud. I'm going to switch back to PowerPoint here. Now I want to talk a bit about some options that I've seen or have used for more open input on things. So polls and word clouds are great for little bursts of information that you want to compile across a group. We've also been using virtual sticky notes with a lot of success. And so the first tool we used for this in a communications workshop last year was Google Slides. Super easy. It's, the Google alternative to PowerPoint. And you can also do this in PowerPoint online, provided that everybody has a Microsoft login, I believe. Google, well, perhaps for Microsoft as well, you just have to be really careful about the link that you share with the group. It has to be set to anyone with the link can edit. And if you do that, then everyone can collaboratively provide input on a slide. So for this example, we had pre-populated a slide with these virtual sticky notes and then a bunch of stars on the side, and then just invited people to start entering in short bits of text into the virtual sticky notes, or put stars next to sticky notes that somebody else had already put in, but they really agreed with. And then you can use color coding for grouping things or however you want to arrange it. But we got very quickly a lot of good input, and it's immediately documented for us to look at after the meeting. And so I wanted to talk about, you can also do this through the freemium sites like Mentimeter or MeetingSift. If you use like a Q&A feature, people can kind of type stuff in. But this is great because people can see what the rest of the group is saying as they're typing in their own content. I also wanted to mention Google Jamboard if people haven't used this yet. And so this is very similar to what I just showed working in Google Slides for doing virtual sticky notes or other types of input. But for Jamboard, Google really stripped away all the other stuff that was focused on making presentations. And it's just about getting input from groups. So all the controls are moved over to the left. You can ask a question and then let people respond in any way they want to. So they can use a pen tool to draw something or write something. There's paintbrush and marker tools and highlighters. They can use sticky notes. They can upload an image that they feel is relevant to the discussion, or they can take a selfie through their webcam, which is pretty neat. And then you can draw with, shapes and text. And then if you're having a discussion about what people put up on the Jamboard, that last option in the menu is a digital laser pointer where you can, kind of say, this is what I'm looking at, and then use that to kind of illustrate what part of the input you are discussing, but it doesn't like leave a permanent mark on the board. So I don't know if you guys can, I don't think you can click this as I'm presenting. So I'm gonna just put this link in the Zoom chat, and it'll be up there for anyone who wants to kind of explore this, but it's not something that we have to do as part of the presentation. So I've left, oops, sent that just to Amber, to everyone. There's a link that should let you edit the Jamboard, and you can check it out, see how you feel about drawing or leaving sticky notes, etc. And then my last slide here, just closing with some other thoughts. It's great to give people an asynchronous option if you can. For any parents in the group, I'm sure you've heard that term just too much over the last year, synchronous versus asynchronous learning. But in this context, it just means if you're using Google Slides or Mentimeter or what have you, leave it up for 2 days or so after your meeting. And that way you can let your group know if anybody couldn't connect due to technical reasons, or maybe important people didn't make it to the meeting for a scheduling conflict, they can still give their input, and it'll be captured as part of the process. Afterwards, compile that output and send it to the group. And I think, especially since we're not seeing people in person, it helps people to know that their input was heard if they see it fed back to them, and they know that you captured what they provided. There's a lot of options for these. I can't endorse any one of them as a state employee, so I'm just talking about Mentimeter and MeetingSwift as examples, but or Google or Microsoft, but there's a ton of this stuff out there. A lot of it is free with limitations or pretty cheap to purchase. So just explore and find what works for you. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that for virtual meetings like this, we're all tired of showing people our dirty living rooms or houses or whatever on Zoom or your meeting platform of choice. So maybe either choose a virtual background. I'm also getting kind of sick of the default ones that are in Zoom or Teams. So try making your own at Canva, which Pooh is going to talk about, or some other design tool. Or you can download ours if you want a native species background for your virtual meetings. And that's all I had today. So thanks very much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Hoku, and I'm happy to answer any questions folks have.
Mahalo nui, Josh. Thank you so much. I think we've got Amber's managing our chat box.
Yeah, I didn't see any chats come in. Just a few comments about if you're working through UH, you can get a Zoom Pro account for free through UH if you're not aware of that already. I think people were saying how they like the Mentimeter. Someone had asked if the information gathered from these sites gets stored or if you can download them after the meeting. And let's see.
Does, yeah, and then you can delete it from the service. So it's, if you want to keep it more private, download it and then delete it from Menti or wherever. And I saw this is a good example of testing things beforehand, which I did not do this time, but people noted that the QR code is apparently question specific. I have those two Menti questions in the same presentation, so I thought it would take you to the first slide, but it went straight to the second one. And so that's something I should have tested beforehand, but at least the QR code worked. That's good to know.
And I just wanted to make one quick point about polls on Zoom that I found when you do a poll, because we record a lot of these workshops and things like that. If you're recording, the polls don't actually show up in the recordings. So if you're going to use polls, it's good for the moderator or for the presenter to actually verbally state the results, saying like, oh, it looks like as if 68% of you agreed that this is Rod or something along those lines, just so it's actually recorded under Zoom. So that's just something that we found when using polls, like the polls today, things like that. Just a quick mention on that one.
And another thing I found with Zoom polls is if you do a breakout room, the poll doesn't come with you.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just assume that it would. I see Brian Tucker's got a question up here. It says Zoom Pro accounts free through UH. Do we go through IT for this? Might be something that we could answer, get information for later.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that, but I know that the PCSU staff I work with have gotten their free accounts. So it's handled through UH. I don't know if it's ITS or somebody else. JB says yes.
Yeah, Brian, I just put the link in there to get your account. So I just put it up. It just came from me on how to get your Zoom account.
And then I see JB had a question about using tools for internal organizational meetings versus external community meetings. I think it really depends on the topic and the type of community group. I think that the more familiar you are with the group and the smaller the group, the more comfortable I would be using some of these different tools. And, you know, you kind of know the technical limitations of the group as far as internet access and comfort with using some stuff that they might not have seen before. If it's a larger community group, I'd feel pretty comfortable doing polling. But then it becomes a question of how formal do you have to be about the topic you're discussing, and how do you record what people say? So for the state, you know, we obviously have a lot of restrictions for formal meetings where we have to document public input in a certain way. And I don't think anybody at the Office of Information Practices set up their rules with Mentimeter in mind. So we're in a brave new world. And so I think that the smaller the group, the more informal, the more comfortable I would be using these tools.
Nice.
Great, thank you. Before Hoku, before we get on to our last survey,